Hello, and welcome to Congressman Jerrold Nadler's virtual small business town hall. Before we get started, I wanted to help familiarize folks with Teams, our platform today. Our video feed has just started, and I'm activating the chat function, which can be found at the top of your screen. Click on the chat boxes with a question mark to open the window. There are two tabs here: Featured Questions, where you'll be able to see the questions we are covering at that moment, and My Questions, where you can enter questions to submit to our panelists. And with that, I'd like to introduce Congressman Jerrold Nadler.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. And thank you to our guests from the Small Business Administration, the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, and the Columbia Harlem Small Business Development Center for joining us for this important discussion. Before we dive into our small business questions, I want to take just a few minutes to talk about where we are as a country and as a community. Today, our nation, and particularly our region, is faced with a health and economic crisis of historic proportions. We sit in the epicenter of the global COVID-19 pandemic, with the number of reported cases in New York surpassing the total of any country other than the United States as a whole. We will look back at this period as the greatest time of loss in our lifetimes, and I want you to know it is okay to grieve. I certainly am. For those we have lost, for those suffering, and for the moment at least, for our way of life. New Yorkers are not strangers to adversity, and from 9/11 to Superstorm Sandy, we have stood together in the face of extreme hardships over the past 20 years. As has always been the case, I am deeply proud of how our community has responded. From sidewalk social distancing and nightly cheers, to meal deliveries and mutual aid, everyone has in some way done their part to help bend the curve, protect our vulnerable, and care for each other. Even in the darkest of nights, it is these bright spots that we will remember: the community's efforts, our efforts, your efforts. As we pay homage to our healthcare workers, first responders, and essential workers, it's also important that we acknowledge where our efforts are falling short. I know many people joining our discussion today are doing so because they are fearful about the future of their small businesses, which have been devastated by the pandemic. And I know that no matter how dire things become, New Yorkers have proven time and again that they will pave a road forward by working together to rebuild. But New Yorkers cannot do it alone, and they cannot do it without assistance. The level of aid must match the enormous and continually growing scale of this disaster. Our topic tonight, small business, is an incredibly important one. In New York City, 98% of all businesses employ fewer than 100 individuals, and 89% employ fewer than 20. New York City will not be able to rebuild its economy in the aftermath of this pandemic without the survival and the good health of its small businesses. Over the last 2 months, Congress has passed 3 major stimulus packages. The largest of these, the CARES Act, created the Paycheck Protection Program, providing low-interest loans and grants specifically for small businesses devastated by the pandemic. This program was intended for small businesses and small businesses alone. Unfortunately, while the programs created in the CARES Act were designed to help devastated small businesses, many banks to whom the money was channeled chose to put their wealthy and well-connected clients first, leaving little for true small businesses before exhausting the funding of the initial appropriation. In response, last week, Congress passed an interim stimulus package known as COVID 3.5 that recapitalized the Small Business Assistance Program and increased funding for our hospitals and testing capabilities. In order to ensure that all eligible small businesses have access to this critical assistance, Democrats secured an agreement in the legislation to guarantee that $60 billion of the new funding will go to underbanked small businesses by directing it to mission-based, community-oriented lenders. I'm also pleased that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, recently released new guidance to prohibit large publicly traded companies from receiving funds intended for small businesses. I'm, however, aware that this new funding will not be enough to meet the needs of our community, and far more must be done to ensure that our most vulnerable small businesses have the support they need and deserve. To the small businesses that have yet to receive assistance, please know that our work is far from finished. Congress is working on a fourth stimulus package, and I'm working closely with my colleagues to get our community the resources we need. Some of the items I am fighting to include in the next bill, which we will hopefully pass in the next few weeks, include $100 billion in emergency rental assistance for people, protecting our elections and universal mail-in ballots, a fix to ensure business interruption insurance covers pandemics, increasing SNAP and food assistance, revenue replacement for our state and local governments to stave off dramatic program cuts. This, as you've probably read, is somewhat controversial. Funding for our vital service agencies, including the Postal Service and our transit agencies like the MTA, which needs at least $4 billion, and a number of others we don't have time to cover. I'm also working with House Small Business Committee Chairwoman Nydia Velázquez to ensure that our programs for small businesses are improved. Specifically, we want to support small businesses in high rent areas like New York by removing the harmful 75-25% rule for PPP that prohibits small businesses from using more than 25% of the funding for non-payroll costs like commercial rent. We want to fix the PPP application process to make it more accessible for nonprofits, micro-businesses, and the self-employed. We want to reverse the administration's harmful policy of preventing businesses whose owners have criminal records from obtaining PPP loans and removing other restrictions added by the administration after Congress approved the programs. And we want to work with the SBA on ways to relieve the financial burden of small businesses that had disaster loans before the pandemic started. We want to improve the time frame in which disaster loan advances are distributed to the 3 days that was called for in the CARES Act. I want to commend the SBA for how many loans it has gotten out in a short period of time, given its limited resources. And we want to provide assistance for businesses that have been shuttered for longer than 8 weeks because of stay-at-home orders. In the meantime, I will continue to work with the SBA and the Treasury to get this right and to provide greater clarity and transparency about the programs. I'm also interested to hear from you about your experiences and needs so we can work to get the resources you need. My office is fully operational, and we are actively answering calls and emails. My website, nadler.house.gov, has lots of resources. My constituent service team is available to answer questions and provide all the assistance we can. If you need individual assistance, please submit a request on my website under Serving You, and my website again is nadler.house.gov. Go to that website and submit a request under Serving You, Help with a Federal Agency. That puts it directly into our tracking system so one of my caseworkers can follow up with you. I look forward to the discussion with our excellent guest tonight and answering as many questions as we can. If we are unable to get to your question, please know we are recording all of them, and we'll do our best to answer them after the town hall. First up, I would like to introduce Beth Goldberg, the New York District Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Beth, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Would you like to say a few words to start us off?
Thank you. Okay, I see I'm live now, Jerry, so good to know. I guess that's your microphone maybe giving feedback. I'm not sure. I'm hearing some bounce back. Thank you so much for inviting me today. You know, there are over, in New York City alone, there are close to 600,000 small businesses, and they're the lifeblood of our neighborhoods and our commercial centers. The SBA did more lending in the past 14 days than it has done in 14 years. And while we've heard some news media focused on who did get the loans, I just want to rest assure people that 1.7 million small businesses across our nation were able to ascertain loans. over 74% of the businesses that got loans were small businesses, and the average size of the loans were $150,000 or less. So round two today, we've seen tremendous demand on our systems. Unlike the first day on April 3rd, today there are 5,000 lenders that have been signed up for Paychex 2. And a lot of banks, as you know, and lending institutions had a backlog of applications that they were ready to approve. So there has not been, for those who are listening and are familiar with the application, there has not been any changes in the application process. I'm happy to answer questions about that in today's forum, but there have been more banks that have been added to the system, and the systems, I'm not a systems person, but the system is filtering that no bank or lending institution can ascertain more than 10% of the available monies, including from the first round of paychecks. And as you know, $60 billion has been reserved for community banks and small lending institutions, CDFIs. And that's being, correlated and down in Washington with formulas and algorithms to make sure lending is happening. It's above my diploma grade, if not my pay grade. But so I'm happy to help, answer questions when you're ready on what's happening right now and point people to resources that can help them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce Karen Nadler Simmons, the director of the Columbia Harlem Small Business Development Center, which is an incredible resource in our district. Karen, would you like to say a few words of introduction?
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, wonderful. My name is Karen Nadler Simmons. I'm the director of the Columbia Harlem Small Business Development Center, which is located in Upper Manhattan at Columbia Business School. We offer technical assistance, including one-to-one business counseling and education to anyone starting or growing a business in the state of New York. We are a regional center, one of 24 centers in the state of New York, one of 8 centers in New York City. And the difference between the Small Business Development Center and the Small Business Administration, I'm going to just go into the differences. The SBDCs are resource partners of the Small Business Administration. We offer webinars and resources and strategies on emergency loan and grant programs, business survival, starting new businesses. We also offer confidential, no-fee, one-on-one assistance in applying for financing, survival strategies, financial management, marketing, unwinding a business, and starting a new business. We also offer connections to other resources to help your business and your employees. And we find answers to the questions of today. The SBDC does not provide funding of any kind. We do not provide loans, grants, equity investments, but we are able to help you identify opportunities. We do not evaluate your funding request or decide on the amount of funding that you will receive. The SBA offers emergency loans and forgivable loan programs, including the Paycheck Protection Program, loan guarantees, economic injury disaster loans, and express bridge loans. The SBA also offers financing programs such as the 7A loan, the 504, Express, Community Advantage, Microloan, Export Express, Export Working Capital, and International Trade Loan. The SBA also manages the 8A Business Development Program and Hub Zone Program to help socially and economically disadvantaged people or entities obtain government contracts. And they offer webinars on accessing capital and government contracting. The SBA does not provide individual assistance in applying for financing. That is the role of resource partners such as the SBDC. And the SBA does not provide individual business and management advice. Our office is located, as I mentioned, at Columbia Business School, although we are working remotely, as all centers in New York State are. And you can learn more about the center that is your regional center by going to nyssbdc.org.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. Now, we're supposed to be joined at this point by Jessica Walker, the President and CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, which has been providing invaluable guidance and advice to businesses and policymakers at all levels. But I'm told that Jessica is having a technical difficulty joining us, so we will skip her for the moment. If she manages to get on, we'll come back to her. But I'll now ask our moderator to give a brief overview of how we're going to do the question and answer period, which will start now, and we'll suspend in case Jessica manages to get on. But for the moment, we'll start the question and answer period, and I'll ask the moderator to give a brief overview of how we're going to do it. Our moderator.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Nadler. Sorry about that. So at the top of your screen, for those who missed it before, who have joined us since our last announcement, there is a box that has two chat boxes with a question mark. Under there, you should see two boxes. One is featured questions. Those are the questions that we are teeing up to ask our panelists next. And the other is my questions, which is where you can submit the questions you would like for our panelists to answer. We are not going to be able to get to all of the questions tonight. We've already have a great deal number of them coming in. So we are going to be categorizing them and posting answers afterwards. So with that, I'd like to start with our first question for our panelists. And our panelists, if you want to just raise your hand if you'd like to chime in, I'll switch the camera over to you. We have Ken Smith, who says, I'm a small business with 4 employees, and the Paycheck Protection Program is important for me to maintain my employees and pay rent. I'm concerned that my bank, the Bank of America, and the other large banks are not serving small businesses like mine who don't always have lines of credit for like larger businesses who seem to have got preference in the first round of the program. How can we make sure the program really helps small businesses like mine?
So I'll take that. Can you hear me? You can hear me. Thanks, Jerry. Many banks have been flooded with applications, and a lot of banks are processing in paychecks to the backload of applications they have. Since this program began, the SBA has approved almost 1,000 new lenders to come into the program. We had over 1,100 active lenders when we first started, and now they're close to 5,000. So I will provide the Congressman with this website, but it's sba.gov/Paycheck Protection Program /find. And there you will see a big map of the United States. And in the box, you put in your zip code, and all the lenders in your area will come up. 5 lenders at a time. You can click through and the site expands. And you need, that's one of the ways to find a new lender. The second way is that there have been several online lenders that were approved basically the day before the appropriations ran out last week or 2 weeks ago. And so they did not really participate in the first round. Some of them are familiar to you, like Cabbage, On Deck, PayPal, Intuit. There's a whole list of them. Some of them, like Square, PayPal, and Intuit, are requiring that you be customers and use their products. But the other ones, like On Deck, Cabbage, Fund, Jira, Bowfly, they're looking for new clients, so you can just go on and fill out those applications. The things that you need to be very careful of, and what I want to warn you, is there's a lot of fraud in the program, and that you must, the only place that you can get 100% accurate information is at SBA.gov. There are people using SBA.com, SBA.org, paycheckprotection.com, org, SBA.gov, only place where the real information is. So, Karen, I don't know if you have anything. Nice to see you, and I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that you've definitely included everything. There are small banks that are getting a slight set aside, as Congressman Nadler said, and so we are also encouraging clients to go to the small banks as well. Those would be banks with deposits of less than, I believe it's $10 billion.
And let me just add that these would be banks that you don't have to have a current relationship with. Mm-hmm. They have been given appropriations for the purpose of lending them out under the PPP and to small businesses, and you can go there even if you don't have a relationship with them, because the bank you do have a relationship with is concentrating on its big customers.
All right, so I think that actually answers our next question, which is what mechanisms in place to ensure that small businesses are the beneficiary of the $110 million set aside for the PPP. So we're going to skip over to a question from Robin, who asks, will there be commercial rent forgiveness? Mr. Nadler, I believe you muted yourself.
Oh. Am I unmuted now? Okay. That's something we're working for in the next bill. I mentioned that in my opening remarks as something that we want to have in COVID-4. We anticipate, I hope, we're going to pass the fourth bill, the COVID-4, sometime in the next few weeks. And that's one of the things that some of us, Congresswoman Velasquez, who's chairwoman of the Small Business Committee, myself, and others, are pushing to include in that bill. It's not there now. But we are pushing for the next bill, and hopefully we'll get it.
So just to add, in this program, which is mostly for paycheck protection, there are 25% of other costs allowed, in that is rent, mortgage interest, utilities. And so when you're working out your loan proposal, that extra money can go toward in that loan can go toward rent.
And we're also trying to get the 25/75, again, as I mentioned, eliminated so that you can use more than 25% for commercial rents in high rent areas such as New York.
Okay, good.
We would advise all clients to begin negotiations with your landlord. Very important for commercial tenants to review leases. If you need to speak with the attorney who originally negotiated the lease, please do so and understand what your rights and responsibilities are with the lease terms, as well as come up with some creative solutions for reducing your expenses. This is the time for all commercial tenants to be able to do that.
All right, so our next question is from Ellen, who asked, for sole proprietors, what documentation can be used to show salaries since we don't have W-9s? We got a note back stating that they need more documentation, but no one to call to clarify.
I got that. So sole proprietors file a Schedule C on their income tax. The line is line 31, which is your net income after all your expenses. And that line gets divided by 12 and multiplied by 2.5 to figure out how much money you can borrow as a sole proprietor. And that's, if you have not filed your 2019 taxes, that's okay. What you need to do is prepare that Schedule C, and then that is acceptable documentation to the banks for what your income was. Every lender is different. Remember, this is not the SBA doing the loan. Some banks may ask you for bank statements. Some small businesses, sole proprietors that have a few employees may use ADP or Pay.com, and those records are perfectly fine to print out that and submit with it. But at the very least, you need a Schedule C, line 31, and you must have income on that line. If you are not making money, you're not eligible for the PPP.
All right. So our next question is from Bill Berner. Can you tell me if monies returned to the Treasury from companies that borrowed from the PPP will be returned to the fund and made available for new loans, in addition to the second round allocation that was enacted at the end of last week?
The money that, are you asking if the money that these larger companies are returned, will it be reloaned? I believe so. I've seen some things on that, but I haven't seen anything definitive yet.
All right. Beth, this question is all directed directly to you. To Beth, will the SBA allow applications for the EIDL again? I am an LLC partnership with no employees, yet only open for 4 months before COVID-19. Never got to apply for the EIDL because there were so many questions at the time, then it closed. I may only qualify for the EIDL and very much need it.
At this time, there's been, the SBA will not be opening applications for the EIDL loans. The backlog is probably in excess of the appropriation that we've just been given, and they're processing, the SBA processes on first come, first serve. So if this money is exhausted again, the EIDL will not open.
But if this money, let me add, if this money is exhausted again, it's something we should again refresh in the COVID-4 bill. So I hope the SBA will let us know if it appears that they're going to need an additional appropriation for that.
I'll pass the word along.
So our next question is, I'm a freelancer. I applied for help weeks ago. I received a file number, but I've heard nothing. Do I need to file again or just wait? This is from Frank Beecham.
Frank, what did you apply for? I don't know. If he applied for an EIDL loan, he's in the queue and got a loan number. That loan number must start with a 3, and then you're in the queue. If the loan number applied with a 2, then you have to reapply, and you won't lose your place in the queue. As long as you enter the same information, because they went to a simpler application. If you applied for PPP with a lender, only your lender can tell you where you are in communication with the lender. We'll let you know what's happening. The SBA has no way to know what's happening to your loan in that process. We only know when a loan has been booked, when it's completed and they're requested a guarantee from us. I want to just say to everyone, please check your spam and junk folders. A lot of stuff has been getting lost in those folders and been marked spam. So if you have applied, check those folders and see whether or not you have any updates in there. Thank you.
All right, our next question is for Corinne. Corinne, do you provide office space for small biz?
We do not provide office space for small businesses. However, we do have relationships with realtors. So your SBDC business advisor can connect you with a commercial realtor who can help you find office space.
Okay, our next question is from Nicholas. He says, I know that my PPP loan application has moved through my bank to the SBA, but it hasn't moved forward due to the depletion of the funds in the program. Given the recent re-upping of the fund for the PPP loan, when will that money move to our current unprocessed applications?
Well, let me just add that we just added $60 billion for that purpose. We did this last week in Congress, so that should go quickly. It should go to the SBA right away, and they should start processing it.
Right. I think he asked about the PPP loan, and the PPP loan does not get to the SBA until it's booked, meaning until everything is completed at the bank and they've asked for an authorization number. So once that happens, you should get some information. If it's truly been at the SBA, there are a lot of stories going around, and you know, banks have been telling their clients to call us for information that they have. So once your loan is ready to go, the bank has to work pretty quickly because they only have 10 days to disperse the loan from loan commitment to disbursement. Otherwise, the money is pulled back and is recirculated. So you should be in touch with your bank to find out where they are in the process and where you are in the queue. And I know it's difficult to get information on that. And the $60 billion was for the idle loans. Congressman, you actually gave us $310 billion for the PPP loan. So there's a little bit more money there to go around. Thank you.
All right, our next question is, will the forgiveness period be extended for companies, i.e. restaurants, that may not be able to reopen by June and repay the 75% of the payroll by the deadline?
I'm going to toss that to the congressman because the legislation says that the program closes right now on June 30th.
Well, I would anticipate that we would extend that. It is becoming clearer, the president's comments notwithstanding, that all of this is not going to be over by June 30th, that a lot of it's going to have to be extended, that we may have a recurrence of the pandemic in the fall. I do believe that either in the next bill or the one after that, we're going to have to extend all these deadlines, because this legislation was enacted on the assumption that this is a temporary problem. And it is a temporary problem, but how temporary? It's looking a little less temporary now. It's looking like it'll go on, and we're going to have to extend these programs, and I assume we will. And I certainly will push for that.
Okay, our next question is, if we can pay our payroll expenses but not our rent, are we able to apply for a PPP loan?
So the PPP loan is for payroll primarily. I think that working with a business counselor such as Karin at the SBDC, you should lay out a budget, and we in the finance field call it sources and uses. Figure out where you have the greatest potential to get money from and which expenses line up with which sources of revenue.
Let me add that I mentioned in my opening remarks that I'm working with Nydia Velasquez, the chairperson of the Small Business Committee in the House, to remove the 75-25% rule, so that small businesses in high rent areas like New York can use more of the funding for rent without being penalized. And that's one of the things we are trying to do for the next bill.
I just wanted to touch on that because it is about business strategy. And the Columbia Harlem Center has actually posted a pandemic resiliency guide on our website. The address is www.8.gsb.columbia.edu/SBDC coronavirus, and it includes detailed steps for helping your business through this. For example, step 1 is to assess, step 2 is to plan, step 3 is to communicate, step 4 is to implement, and step 5 is to operate, so that you can get your businesses back up. And we are available to help you think through strategies for bringing your business back or for continuing your business during this pandemic.
And I want to add that, again, I mentioned this in the opening remarks, one of the things we're fighting for, again, in the next bill is not only the changing the 75-25 formula, but we're trying to get $100 billion in emergency rental assistance. It's not there now, but we're pushing this for the COVID-4 bill, and that would be a great help, obviously, if we can do that.
Okay, our next question is from Renee. When can we expect guidance on how to apply for/calculate PPP forgiveness amount? We received a loan and have been funded, but we don't have enough information on forgiveness application process to prepare or budget for it.
So your bank will is the one that needs to certify your forgiveness. There has been no rules promulgated yet on the actual forgiveness, but you know what you got funded for. So as a small business, I would document those expenses so that when your bank asks for them sometime in the last week in June or very early July, that you are prepared to show them what you have done with the money. Karen, do you have any strategies that you're using with businesses right now for the ends of the loan?
We do have a sheet on our website as well. We are suggesting that that businesses actually do open a separate account for this funding. And once it's dispersed into their main business account, that they move it into the separate account and pay their bills, pay paychecks through that, so that they have as much clarity and they're not commingling funds between their regular operating funds and these loan funds.
Okay, our next question. My local bank can't seem to get my application through the SBA site. What do I do? We're hanging on and have not fired anyone yet, but we are running out of money.
The SBA site was closed from Paychex One for around 10 days, I think, and it opened today at 10:30. And in order to avoid some of the issues that the Congressman referred to with certain customers rushing in and certain banks, there's been a slowdown put on the system with how many loans that we're accepting per hour. Right before the system closed, we were doing $1 billion of authorization every hour, and that has now slowed and has been greatly reduced. So your bank, you know, I don't know where you are in your queue with your bank, but if you were ready to go, you should be processed, hopefully, you know, as quickly as the bank can handle it. So that's what, you know, but the system was closed from April 14th, I believe, through this morning at 10:30. We started up for business up again.
All right, our next question. What percentage of funds are going to mission-based lenders? What qualifies as a mission-based lender?
So $30 billion of funding will be going to lenders that have 10 billion or less in assets. And 30 billion will be going between 10 billion and $50 billion in assets. That class is usually considered community-based banks. And the first one that I referenced are usually CDFIs, not-for-profit lenders, or as you said, mission-based lenders.
Let me add that in the last bill, we added $310 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program and directed that of that, 60 billion had to go 30 and 30 to these smaller classes of banks and mission-based and small banks to make sure that the money went to really small businesses.
Thank you.
And this question is actually just a quick one, hopefully, from Ms. Goldberg. Can you repeat the EIDL application number? If it's a 3 and if it's a 2, what does that mean?
So when we opened up, we had one system that we were using, and those applications, the numbers started with a 2. 4 days later, people may recall, we had to shut our systems down. They were overwhelmed. And we started up with a newer system and a 4-page application. Those application numbers start with the number 3. If you have an application with the number 2, you need to go in and reapply under number 3, and then you'll be kept in the same place that you were in. And you should have gotten a letter around April 1st, or between April 1st and April 3rd, directing you to do that. And again, those letters we heard went into a lot of spam folders.
All right, our next question is from Daniel Schur. Can you apply for a disaster loan advance without applying for a disaster loan? And if you are a sole proprietor with no employees, can you qualify for a disaster loan advance?
So that's like a little bit of a tricky question. The answer is yes, you qualify, but it's in the program's not open right now to apply. And yes, if it reopens, so let's just talk as if Congress gives us enough appropriations so that it does reopen. You can apply for the advance without applying for a loan. And the advance has been limited right now to $1,000 per person as an administrative function because of the high demand that was on the EIDL advance. But as of today, they have not reopened it.
Okay, and just as a quick reminder for everyone who is has joined us a little bit late here, we have many questions. We are going to do our best to answer as many as we can in the time we have left. If your question is not selected for us to be able to answer, and we're not able to answer it live here, Congressman Nadler's office will be publishing written responses in the coming days to as many of these questions as we can, and trying to make sure that we are responding to as many people as possible. So with that, I want to bring up one of our next questions from Samara. I'm a solopreneur and I do not qualify for PPP. There are no other options for me at this time. What do you recommend and what new programs are in the works?
So before I let everyone else take a shot at that, Samara, sole proprietors were opened up on April 10th. For funding and are eligible in this next paycheck round. Again, if you're an independent contractor, you need to put your 1099s together with that documentation. If you're a sole proprietor, you need to prepare a Schedule C, whether or not you filed it, and we look at box 31 toward the loans. If you have income, any amount of income, you're allowed to apply for PPP, and only if that box is 0, line 31, does that make you ineligible. If you have negative, money, negative income, negative revenue, then you cannot apply for PPP. And I'll let Karen and the Congressman comment further.
I agree with Beth on that. I would also look into New York State Department of Labor's unemployment benefits if they apply. Just know that you can only do one. You can either do PPP or New York State Department of Labor unemployment at the same time.
So I just want to announce this for everyone who may miss it in the public questions. We have a question. What is a site for the Columbia Harlem Small Business Development Center again? And if we can read them slowly, it would be helpful.
It's www.gsb.columbia.edu/SBDC/coronavirus. And just a caveat, we have a lot of information on our website that anyone can read at their convenience. In order to become a client of the SBDC, you will need to go to nysbdc.org and complete a request for counseling, and you will be assigned to one of the 24 centers throughout New York State.
All right, our next question. If I received a grant from my bank, does that mean I qualify for a loan, and how do I access it? If my biz received a grant from my bank from the SBA, does that mean I'm going to get a loan, and how do I find out?
Can you repeat that? Is that you received an EIDL grant? Is that what it's referring to?
The question as we have it, if my biz received a grant to my bank from the SBA, does that mean I'm going to get a loan, and how do I find out?
So I assume the person applied for a grant and a loan, and again, there should be documentation from the SBA about that. There's also a number that I can give you to call. It's 800-659-2955. There may be a long wait on the phone, so I'm giving you fair warning. We've hired 7,000 people to man a call center, and you may still have to wait an hour or two. It's up and running 24/7. You know, my best advice is to call off hours and see if you provide them with your loan number, see what information they can provide you with. It may not be much. I don't want to mislead you. People were getting loans dispersed in pieces, and because the EIDL loan is a 6-month working capital loan, and as you show expenses, you more and more money is released. That's what I was not in this position during Sandy, but I understand that's what happened. Karen, I don't know if you were around then, but the disaster loans are not released, I don't believe, all in one lump sum.
Yeah, not that I know of. I don't have enough information about the way it was during Sandy, though.
Right. So it's like, you know, you showed X amount of expenses for the first period. They release that money, and then you have to show what your expenses are. Remember, the EIDL, for those of you who got that money, is a 6-month working capital loan for future expenses. So it operates, it's not short term, like 8 weeks, like the Paycheck Protection Program.
Okay, our next question is from Clement Price Thomas. Like some other very small businesses, it's been hard during this time to collate all the information required to apply for the PPP loans. Will any of the money be held back for those who have yet to be able to submit yet?
The banks are processing loans. Maybe the Congressman could address future funding opportunities.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. We have we appropriated money initially. I think it was $350 billion or something like that for the PPP in the CARES Act. That money ran out, so we then came back and appropriated another $310 billion in the bill we passed last week, directing $60 billion of that to small banks and community institutions. If this money runs out too, I assume we will add to it in the next bill. Remember, we're going to have a series of bills. We're working on bill number 4 now. I mentioned before a number of the things we're working to put in that bill. If the PPP runs out, certainly there'll be a major push, and I will certainly push for adding more funding for it. You have to remember that all of this is being done on an emergency basis, and as the emergency continues, we're going to have to add more. And that's why we had 3.5 bills so far. We had 3 bills so far, and we're working on the 4th bill now. We probably have a 5th and a 6th. But if the money runs out, I am sure that there will be a major push, and I will certainly support it to add the money so that the people who need it get it.
Hi, I just want to add that I know for very small businesses, it can be difficult to get all of the information and documentation that you need to complete the loan process. However, both the EIDL loan and the PPP loan applications are initially actually very, very simple. They ask very few questions. So we do suggest that you apply for those loans, and as soon as you apply, start gathering your documentation. On our website, we have all the information you're going to need step by step. We help you complete the forms. We have webinars. We have instructional one-pagers. And all of the SBDCs are available, business advisors are available to help you with that documentation. But initially, please don't let the difficulty in collating the documents prevent you from applying, because the initial applications are very simple.
Okay, so our next question here is, if we haven't filed our 2019 taxes yet and our accountant is unavailable, can sole proprietors fill out the 2019 Schedule C and submit it?
Yes, you don't have to have filed your taxes yet. You just need to prepare the 2019 Schedule C, and if you can do that, you can submit it.
All right, and this next question is for Representative Nadler. What else could Congress be doing in future legislation to help out small businesses and their employees based on the holes you have seen so far, and what more needs to be done?
Well, I mentioned a number of things before that we're trying to do in no particular order. Well, first of all, increase the funding again, because I'm sure these funds are going to run out. But second of all, in no particular order, we're pushing for $100 billion in emergency rental assistance for small businesses. We are pushing to eliminate the 75-25% rule so that small businesses in high rent areas like New York can use a greater proportion of the funding for rent as is necessary. We are working with we have to do something about relieving the financial burden of small businesses that had disaster loans before the pandemic started. We want to reverse the administration's harmful policy of preventing businesses whose owners have criminal records from obtaining PPP loans, no matter how worthy those loans may be now. We want to fix the PPP application process to make it more accessible for nonprofits and for the self-employed and for micro businesses. These are some of the things. Also, we want we're looking to do a fix to ensure business interruption insurance covers pandemics. And of course, these are some things for small businesses directly. The bigger things that we have to do in the next bill are to provide funding for state and local governments, for the post office, and for testing. But these are things we can do. If you have any other suggestions as to how we can help small businesses, let us know, because we're actively pushing now for inclusion of provisions in the next bill, which I hope will pass sometime in the next few weeks.
All right. So what I'd like to say is our next question. Why are businesses like mine with 9/11 disaster loans being treated as favorably or unfavorably as compared to small businesses with regular SBA loans, the 6-month payment versus 6-month deferral?
I don't know what's unfavorable. The SBA is picking up interest and payments for all outstanding SBA loans for 6 months, starting whatever your first payment is after March 27th. So I don't know. I'm not aware of any bias to anyone who had a loan outstanding from 9/11. So I open it up to my colleagues.
I also agree with Beth. I was very happy to see that 6-month provision, loan forgiveness provision.
I want to jump in now. It's now 7 o'clock, and I just want to note that people at 7 o'clock show their appreciation in various different ways for our first responders and for our medical workers and so forth. So I want to participate and ask everybody to note that right now before we go to the next question.
Okay, so I know some of our speakers have to go. We're scheduled to 7, so let's end on this one. I know the SBA site is now, I'm on the SBA site looking for the zip code map mentioned to find lenders. All I can find is a PDF static list. Where can I find the interactive map?
So this is how I do it, even though I work for SBA. I go to Google search and I put in SBA Paycheck Protection Program, find a lender. And when I click on that link, the map of the US comes up with a zip code box. And then you can put in your zip code. And we will provide a few important links to the Congressman's office tomorrow, so that when he sends out the questions and answers, his office, he will also be able to provide you with the links and the phone numbers as to what's happening. And we'll also include our district resource guide, where you can find the small business development centers. Also, our New York City SCORE chapter is extremely active. They've set up 40 volunteers that are acting as a triage unit to help businesses apply for these loans. And we have women business development centers. You'll be able to find all that information in our resource guide.
Well, thank you for that answer, and thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. And in particular, thank you to Beth Goldberg and Karen Simmons for helping us. Again, if we were unable to get to your question tonight, we will be following up to sharing responses to as many people as we can. If you haven't yet, please go to my website at nadler.house.gov to sign up for my e-newsletter so we can keep you up to date on the latest. I am here to help, as is my staff, so please don't hesitate to reach out to my office if you need assistance. I hope everyone stays healthy and has a good night. Good night.
Right.